Many thanks for staying with us here on Morning at NTV. Time now for the Kickstarter. A very interesting discussion is going to be because behind the scenes it's been hot. All right, I'll be introducing my very eminent and interesting guests who will be helping us with perspective on a range of issues, including dissecting judicial response to the protests in the country. We shall also see what the weight of the anti-corruption protests are on the judiciary, especially in light of some of the charges and the seeming sentences that were slapped down on some of the protesters. We'll also seek to understand why are NGOs silent and how best can they be able to be seen to be doing the work. I'm already being asked questions whether what I'm saying is true. Well, my guests are with me. Well, we're going to see exactly to what extent that is. I'm joined by, let me begin by introducing lawyer Benjamin Katana, the very first time in our new studios. You're most welcome.
Thank you. A great pleasure to join the discussion this morning, and the studios look really nice.
We are honored. And of course, we have with us Sarah Birete, Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Many thanks for making it.
Thank you for inviting me, and good morning, viewers.
And many thanks for making it to Captain Francis Babu.
Thank you for having us, and good morning to all of you, wherever you are. And I'm sorry about the traffic around Parliament. We are not getting in. I spent 30 minutes on Nile Avenue just to get here.
It's a crime scene.
Of crime.
No,
I don't know.
let me stay with you on that.
Yes.
You have been a victim, but you are again sorry. I want to understand the contradiction. Who are you apologizing to?
I'm apologizing to the other members who are using the transport system.
Are you in any
who are
way,
going to work?
Are you in any way one who is mandated to provide or streamline it?
No, I don't. No. I have a right as a Ugandan, and by the way, I have a lot of rights. The people in government, they immediately get in there, they have less right than I have.
Okay.
Because I am saying I'm going to do something, and I've got to be there. I've got a time limit. Most of those people are going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, well, if you want to close Parliament off, that's fine, but not all the roads around it. I think they should...
there must be a way it can be done.
That's right,
to
in a better way.
that
In a
it
better
doesn't
way.
affect.
I'm not saying they shouldn't do what they're doing. What I'm saying is let them allow traffic to flow.
Okay.
In a better way.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting there. Of course, what is being done at Parliament, the diversions in traffic are all down to the fact that the last 7 days have been tense on account of protests against corruption. Corruption whose head has widely been seen to show within the precincts of the House. Accusations against the Speaker, accusations against members of Parliament, accusations coming directly from the President, and of course where he alludes to the fact that some members of Parliament colluded with officials at the Ministry of Finance to do budget allocations that were wayward, and that has of course seen some members of Parliament go in jail, and the cases are still on. But in light of the last 7 days, what has been happening in the country, the protests against corruption, the arrests as well as the detentions, bringing into question the dispensation of justice. Let me begin with the lawyer, Benjamin Katana. There were charges that were slapped against the protesters, including the charges of being idle and disorderly, and also being public nuisance. First, take us through what the legal framework now is with regard to these charges.
I think the starting point, Chris, and our viewers, is to appreciate that the offenses of public nuisance, being idle and disorderly, are largely colonial instruments that were used as instruments of repression against citizens. And over time, they have been rendered redundant. I remember some time back, Museveni himself said, how can a citizen be found idle and disorderly in his or her own country. And because how do you determine that I'm idle and disorderly? By being in a place. But I think what we are witnessing, I think, is not a technical issue. But when you want to herd people into a corner, then you must find an instrument to use. And because they could not find any appropriate charges to slap on these persons, that's why they ended up with these, I don't even think I should even call them offenses. But the whole idea, and I think that's you have talked about the response from the judiciary and the outcry from the public, is the weaponization of courts of law as instruments of repression. Yet there are clearly well-stipulated processes that should be able to protect citizens from abuse. And one of them is prosecutorial discretion. That as a prosecutor, because when police arrests a person, they present a file to the DPP
of charges
to look at the facts and advise. Should this person be presented in court? Should this person be allowed to go home because his or her arrest is inappropriate? And at that stage, the DPP has the duty, through the various state attorneys, has the duty to advise and say this person has not committed an offense. If the state attorney or the DPP sanctions a charge that is defective or should not, even the trial magistrate should be able to say this cannot stand in a court of law. So what we have been complaining about is the weaponization of these institutions that ordinarily should be the gatekeepers against violation of human rights, being used as instruments of repression.
Okay.
The other aspect that has been talked about widely is abuse of processes like bail. Because courts have even previously...
If you don't mind,
yes.
Let's first keep the aspect of bail. We shall come to that a little bit later. But I need clarity on redundancy of an aspect. For example, you speak about the fact that the charges slapped against those that were arrested are largely colonial era kind of dispensation. What do you mean exactly? Don't we have these on the statutes? Have they been repealed? What's the dysfunction like? Largely
outlawed, like the one on idle and disorderly.
It's outlawed?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a judge or a magistrate or a judicial officer who knows and understands pretty well that these have been outlawed, but still rolls out charges on the same, and it stands?
Well, standing or not standing, I think, is something that will be decided in due course.
You know?
But what the concern has been that when the charge sheet appears before a judicial officer, and it is glaringly defective and should not see light of day in any courtroom, they should not wait for the process for it to be raised after a month or so when an innocent citizen has been remanded. We have even had cases where when a person appears and even the lawyers are not allowed to say anything, they stay remanded. I'm not the trial magistrate. The matter will come up after 2 weeks. I think that and other aspects which you said you want us to discuss later are the basis of the outcry from the public that they are being failed by an institution that should be able to be the last line of defense in protection of fundamental human rights.
Sarah Birete, I know you've been out and about, and you do interface with either victims or people who are facing some of these charges, either taken to courts or very frivolous. charges. Like when these protests happened and the arrests were conducted and of course the detentions executed, how were you looking at matters and what has happened between that time of arrest and now, given your position and your good offices within the civic space?
Well, first I want to underscore the fact that the justice, law and order sector is undermining constitutionalism and rule of law in Uganda instead of promoting it. Judicial power is derived from the people and must be exercised in accordance with the wishes, aspirations, yes, and desires of the people. So when you have courts criminalizing dissent, courts criminalizing peaceful demonstrations, courts criminalizing people's participation in governance, then they are a problem to this country. They are a problem to constitutionalism in Uganda. They are a problem to rule of law that they are supposed to promote and accelerate in this country. So you have a dilemma of the collapse of the cardinal function of judiciary in democratization. That is a big problem that should worry everyone. When you look at these current protests, there was a notice of more than 1 month of the young people to protest, and that's in accordance with the Public Order Management Act. The young people were enjoying 3 fundamental rights. One is the power belongs to the people in participation of their democracy. And the youth are saying they want to fight corruption. When you go to Article 17 on duties of the citizen, one of the duties of a citizen is to fight corruption and stop misuse of public property. So the citizens are carrying out their duty, constitutional duty, to fight corruption. Then you come to Article 29 of the Constitution, freedom to freely protest and demonstrate with others. So when you have the police taking this as a crime, in conspiracy with the DPP and the courts, then you have a collapse of the Constitution. What the DPP and judiciary are dealing with is a constitutional crisis in this country. Because if the president says young people should not fight corruption, or they should not fight corruption in accordance with his wishes, Article 99 of the Constitution on executive authority enjoins the president to promote the Constitution. He does not keep writing the Constitution that fits his wishes. So you don't dictate to how people should enjoy their rights when you are a president. You promote the Constitution. So you have a corrupt source of executive authority to promote the Constitution in this country. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? These institutions under state capture. And of course, the bigger problem is a failed transition, where you think you have a presidency that is now above the Constitution. Demonstrate on a Sunday, demonstrate on a this day. Where is that written? What is the source of that law?
Wow.
These are the questions that must be answered.
You said, what's the way forward? One person who might have an idea is Captain Francis Babu, given his extensive knowledge and observance of the ins and outs, the workings, and some of the things that happen within Uganda. What's your take on what's happening?
Well, first and foremost, everything that has been said is true. It's in the Constitution. Everything is written. The rights are there, and so on and so forth. Now you sit down and say, on one side you have those human rights, on the other side you have the state. I think the problem has been, do we understand how statehood, how statecraft is done? And do we understand how we came into power? I think a lot of people, and by the way, the annoyance is, to me, is acceptable. When somebody gets annoyed with what has happened. I read a letter written by one of the doctors in Makere, and it was a very nice letter. He said, how can an 80-year-old arrest 20-year-old young people? Of course, from that point of view, and from what you can see, and the picture which is painted, very unfortunate. But then let's look at what the state thinks. Sometimes it's better to see what the other side thinks before you answer the question. The state is worried. I don't know why you people are looking at it as if it is a defense. They're actually worried.
They are afraid.
Yes, they are worried with what could come out of a demonstration. They are not saying that these people, what they are saying is wrong. They are more worried about the demonstration than
and what it could trigger.
What is in the letter, the 7 points which they made. The 7 points are acceptable. In fact, I think the head of state said if it was not because of demonstration, I would have joined the group.
To demonstrate against its government?
No, not demonstrate. He would have joined if they were not demonstrating. He would have joined them for that corruption, those 7 points. He agrees with them.
Or maybe you mean he would have joined them if they were not protesting and demonstrating.
No, demonstration is what we're talking about. We're talking about, here is the state. The demonstration gives a picture. You see, a lot of people have not realized that demonstration, I mean, that group could have called a press conference and read those 7 points. They could have even sent that information through different channels. But they went to demonstrate. Demonstration brings out a different picture to the whole world. And therefore, the state gets worried what would happen out of that demonstration. Can you imagine our neighbors? It started very nicely, like here. For them, they let it go. It has developed into something else. Here, it has been foiled. It's been stopped. Now, the charges I do not agree with. I do not agree taking them to prison. I do not agree. They could have used a different method. Probably they could have stopped them and gone away with it and saying, look, although we are the state, but you should stop this. I just want you to imagine, all of you, if that thing was allowed to go on and to pick it up, and the next day it picked up again, and the next day it picked up again, what would have happened? And then there is also the people who are fighting the system from outside this country. Forget about our politics here. Let's take it from a terrorist point of view. They're there. They are not very far away from this argument. Imagine people hijacking that exercise. So the state has to think about all those points. To them, that's what comes in mind. Now, after you've got the level of thinking of the state, then you say, how do you handle a situation like the one we've had the other day, whereby a few rules could be suspended, as far as I'm concerned. That's what they would say. And stop it. And put it in, stop it before it even starts. I think that's where the argument is. It's not that they do not agree with the corruption. Actually, they do. One person said, these people are protecting the corrupt. You can interpret it the way you like. The whole argument, I don't think they're worried about the corrupt. They are more worried about the demonstration, the kind of picture that comes out of a demonstration, here in the country and outside the country. That demonstration allowed to go on would attract even more demonstrations.
Captain?
Yes.
I appreciate your ability to help us understand how the state is thinking.
Yes.
Are you negating the thinking of the citizens?
No, when it comes to revolution, the citizen...
Must we understand the state?
You see, the order, according to them, they are protecting the citizen. According to them. By stopping revolution, by stopping demonstration growing bigger and bigger, they are actually protecting, they are putting out law and order as far as they're concerned. Now, after we've said that, whether it is right or wrong, that's a different argument.
Okay.
All I'm trying to tell you is that somebody within the system of statehood, within the system of statecraft, is saying, no, don't allow it. As we talk right now, Nigeria is having the same problem. Did you know that?
Yes.
Nigeria is having the same problem?
They're having a set of problems.
They're exactly doing the replica of what happened here.
Benjamin, your submission on what the captain says, because it has also completely taken my thinking to a place where I'll be asking a question to him later to help us take us through the thinking of the state when rolling out public service. What do they think at that point in time? To siphon, to embezzle money? Who are they protecting at that point in time? But what's your submission on what the captain says?
I think the starting...
Is it plausible? Should we understand the state?
No, we shouldn't. The starting point is that there is no state without the citizens. The citizens are actually one of the most critical defining aspects of a state.
States.
Number two is that the state structure must operate within the law, within the constitutional framework. Number three...
For which it's the custodian.
For which the constitution actually is supreme. Number three is that the state of Uganda is distinguishable from the government of NRM and Museveni. Now, the challenge we have is the fusion of the state and the individual. When citizens are expressing dissatisfaction with the manner in which government or a government agency is performing its constitutional mandate, because the state of Uganda has been captured by an individual, if this expression of dissatisfaction may translate into a threat to his hold on power, he has mentioned a revolution. When they fear that this may translate into a revolution, then citizens who are expressing themselves, exercising their constitutional rights, have not violated the rights of other people, are treated as enemies of the state. Enemies of the state, ideally, are like people who have declared war on the state of Uganda. Are terrorists, are people that are engaged in activities that threaten the existence of the state of Uganda. But citizens exercising their constitutional rights without violating the rights of other people are not enemies of the state of Uganda. In any case, the citizens, by coming out to protest against corruption, they are trying to protect the state of Uganda from being captured by self-seekers. The other aspect that needs to be appreciated is that, and I already mentioned, that whoever is performing a constitutional duty, a constitutional mandate, whether you are Uganda Police Force, whether you are UPDF, whether you are intelligence services, you must do so within the confines of the law. Now, when you leave the confines of the law and you are acting against the Constitution and the established legal framework, you're the rogue. When you become a rogue state institution, then you cannot say that you are doing so to protect the country. And I will give you an example. When the State Research Bureau was abducting, torturing, and killing citizens here, it also had a constitutional mandate to keep law and order, and that's the excuse they were using. And people say, oh, we have a duty to do ABC. But even the people who operated the gas chambers of Hitler were state actors. They were not a militia group operating outside the state structure. That is why the law exists. That is why the Constitution exists, to be able to guide the conduct and actions of state actors. Now, the conduct of the state actors in the context of the protests that have been happening in Uganda has been unlawful and unconstitutional, because these people, the protesters, exercised their obligation, fulfilled their obligation of notifying the security agencies that we are going to conduct a peaceful protest against corruption. And this is where we are going. The responsibility of the state, through the enforcement agencies, is to come in and say, you're going to use this route because this route is busy. You're going to conduct this between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. in the evening, and you must follow the traffic guidelines, among other things. And I know I have seen agencies come out to say that rights are not absolute. But the limitation on enjoyment of rights also has a limitation which is very critical. The limitation should be, it is also subjected to a threshold of what is demonstrably acceptable in a fair and a democratic society.
Okay. Sarah Birete, take us through the likely options available if you are organizing an initiative or a campaign. It could manifest in like a demonstration or a protest, and the police has concerns about how, where, and the what of that particular protest, demonstration, initiative, or campaign. What options are always available, to the extent that we should be able to understand that if you cannot protest by either moving from one place to another within the city center, there is another option, like Captain says, holding a press conference and then talking about the 7 demands. Or if those two are not acceptable, then maybe the police advises. How does these meetings go on? How does it happen? What are the options that are always available?
First of all, holding a press conference is not a demonstration.
It is a way of relaying the message that...
Yeah, that is normal, that is communication, although some people were also arrested for organizing a press conference. Some of the youth. Yes. Yeah, but that's not a demonstration. So a demonstration simply means that even if you don't communicate, everybody will know these people are against such a position or a stand. To protest, to demonstrate. The common way of demonstration is through marching. March to a certain area, read out your statement. So that marching is the act of demonstrating. But otherwise, reading out a statement, you can post it now on social media, you can write on website, we always make press conferences.
You can rap
yeah, that is just the way of communication. I can buy space here and come and communicate. That is not a demonstration. So when in this country we need to note that it's almost 29 years of the 1995 Constitution, but the right to peacefully demonstrate was hijacked by President Museveni under his government. The only few demonstrations that have successfully taken place in this country, I will mention them, I know two. The first one was when NRM supporters were protesting the candidature of Wamama Mbabazi. They marched from Plot 10 Chadondo, and somewhere they later Fandeka West escorted them, and later they even brought pickups and drove them back to Chadondo. That is the peaceful demonstration I've seen. The second one was when pro-NRM students we are protesting against the suspension of funding for ECOP, and they were escorted by the police, and they presented their petition at the EU delegation. Those are the demonstrations I've seen here that are not disrupted by police and the army. Meaning that for you to protest under this regime, you must protest in support of either NRM party or a government position. So anybody who is not doing the two is blocked with high-handedness. That's why they have undermined the constitution and rule of law in this country. If the people marching were saying we are marching in support of President Museveni and they are wearing yellow, and They would be escorted and even given lifts, and chira buses would be brought. If you are tired, that's what I've seen.
At that point, the threat from any foreign actors would not be apparent, Captain?
No. You see, the problem is we are debating this with emotion. We should debate this with the reality. What is on the ground? And that's what I was trying to give you. I'm not supporting either side. I'm just trying to tell you this is the situation we are having in the country.
In other words, you're advising Ugandans that right now it is important to understand the place of government.
Correct.
How it's thinking.
What is the thing now? What I was trying to do, instead of saying hey, Museveni and whatnot, what is the problem? And we've got to get that problem. What is the level of our development as a country? What's the level of our leaders? What are they like?
Are you telling us to tolerate leaders?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm giving you what it is on the ground. These things we have talked about are all true. I mean, Katana here has given you everything there is in the law. I'm not going to argue against that. This is a fact. I am telling you what is pertaining and what the problems are. And we are not in utopia. We are in a country where we have a lot of problems, and these problems some of them are not even political. Now, you've got to sit down and say, how do we get rid of this kind of resistance on all sides? You asked me, you said something earlier on about corruption. And I think the president said behind these people there are some foreigners who are behind them.
Yeah.
Who is behind the corrupt people? Have you sat down to say that actually the corrupt people might have a bigger thing and there are people behind it fueling corruption? That is another question we've got to answer. Is it something which is bigger? Is it a mafia sort of thing? That actually you hear Prime Minister's office, money gets lost, somebody goes to jail, and all the others are innocent. It's a Prime Minister's office, but only one man goes where? To jail. So these are the kind of questions you've got to ask yourself. You must look at our state, its level of development and its thinking. I want you to go into the thinking of these people. And until you can get that, we can spend all day talking about all these good things.
So how do we help the layman, the taxpayer, to understand a state that at one point, justifiably, as you say, wants to protect and ensure the territorial integrity of Uganda, but the very state is also responsible. I don't know where it acts within the same framework that you're trying to suggest in distributing services or not distributing services, for that matter.
Citizens has been knocking on the door. They've been knocking on the door on the stealing of elections. They've been knocking door on pushing other people out of the system. They've been knocking on the door on the behavior of some of our leaders. They've been knocking on the door of behavior. We're talking about the behavior of our leaders. Nothing has happened.
And we must understand that.
So the next question would be, would demonstration help us to do this? This is another way of knocking the door, isn't it? Question is, how many times have we had demonstrations here and we have knocked the door and nothing has happened?
Answer Sarah Birete's question now.
Yes.
What's the way forward?
That's a good point now. Now we need to get our people to understand how to deal with this system. And I'm very, I'm very pleased that the young people came out with this. And I saw the one in Kenya, I've seen the one here, I'm seeing the one in Nigeria, and this is going throughout the whole of Africa, and even in the eastern countries. As we talk right now, more than 150,000 people have died. 150 people have died in Bangladesh. All right, same thing. So the same sort of government is also suppressing those groups from coming out. No matter what they do now, where we have reached in terms of our development, they are not going to suppress these people any further. What is going to happen, They will do it now. It will start all over again. It will be done all over again. So the leaders in this country have to wake up to the situation and have a mindset change. These laws are there. They know about them. By the way, they've got the best lawyers who can give them these laws. We don't have to come on NTV to tell them. Therefore, and they're breaking them, knowing that they're breaking them. They're knowing what is happening in the judiciary. They know exactly what is happening in the executive. They know what is happening in parliament. And by the way, if they don't wake up and start changing now by action, not by rhetoric, this country is not going to go anywhere. They've got to start implementing what they say. The president has been saying he's fighting corruption. He has to start fighting corruption. And these young men, okay, he stopped them, but he's got the 7 points. What is he going to do about it? So these are the questions. And if he doesn't do anything, another demonstration will come. It will not stop. This is going to keep on coming and coming. We need now to stop and tell our leaders time has come for you to change. We had a fundamental change one time. Now we need a real change into the system. And that real change has to come from the leaders, not from the people, not even from the young people you're talking about. The leaders themselves have to change, and quickly, because we are having a very big problem. And when I read that letter from a doctor from Makerere, it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense that older people who are in power must listen to the young generation, because the future of this country is not in the hands of the old people, is in the hands of the young generation.
Interesting there. I'll be coming to Benjamin Katana very shortly so that we can hammer down the aspect of the judiciary being either complicit or completely aloof. I do not know where some decisions are made or whether a justice or a magistrate simply decides what is convenient and what is not. But let me first get into the mind of Sarah Birete with regard to what we need to do now as a way forward, as suggested by Captain Francis Babu. Demonstrations have not yielded results. Protests have not yielded results. Engagements, dialogue between the civic space actors has not. What is the next course of action? What do you intend to change in your approach? Because the state hasn't listened. That one I must be very specific. The state hasn't acted as you want it to act. You're not going to get guns and fight the state, are you?
Previously it has happened, but before we go to that, you know, as Captain Babu was presenting, that we need to be mindful of the level of development, the level of leaders and situation on the ground. I kept looking at him, and Captain Babu was in CA. They made this constitution 29 years ago. Whom did you make it for? If you're saying that the enjoyment of rights enshrined in this constitution is not for now, after 29 years, whom did you enact this constitution for? Which country did you enact this constitution for? And what has changed that we cannot have it implemented almost after 3 decades? If you made this constitution for Europe, can we then make a constitution for Uganda? Because it's not happening. For me, the way forward is that everybody must have fidelity with the law. The constitution. If we keep giving excuses for failure to implement the constitution, then we will go to the question you've asked. This country has only been ruled through the barrel of the gun. It is not me who went to the bush. It is not me overthrew the previous 7 presidents. They were overthrown by Ugandans whose space was curtailed, whose rights were curtailed, who had no voice in their governance. The spirit of the constitution-making process was never again. The preamble is very clear. Being mindful of our turbulent history, being mindful of the way leaders conduct themselves in power, leaders who are larger than the laws. So where is that spirit today? when you are saying we must be mindful of the situation, we must be mindful of the level of development. I'm sure we are more developed today as compared to 1995 when this constitution was made. So if this constitution then is impossible to implement, whom was it made for? And why do we have it as our grand norm?
Benjamin Katana, you can submit on that, but also help us understand what the conversation is in the judiciary. You had an interface between the bar and the bench some time back. I don't know whether questions, including the ones I have like now, were answered. For example, why is it very convenient for the judges and the prosecutors to be available when the state has been attacked, but these very individuals conveniently are absent, indisposed, taking care of barriers and stuff like that when the citizens need justice? Is that conversation one that the judges are having?
Well, I do not speak for the judges, but there has been a debate on the shrinking independence of the judiciary. And I have seen a statement from the judiciary communicating what they call the commitment to execution of mandates. But what is important is for the judiciary and all our viewers to understand that the commitment is not judged from assurances, but from actions. If state institutions, judiciary inclusive, are to be trusted by the citizens of Uganda, that they are not serving the selfish interests of an individual, but the interests of the people of Uganda, then this should be manifested in how they conduct business. When there is a trend that when people, for example, are arrested in what you would call political activism, which is a legitimate activism,
that's right, that
you are going to impose prohibitive bail terms, that is when you consider bail, then it means that people are going to realize that you have a side that you belong to. But that aside, and he talked about the change in the heart of leaders. I think political scientists have what they call political decay. And one of the dimensions through which it is manifested is the inability of a system to reform. Mr. Museveni has created a web, and this web largely depends on corruption manifested through patronage, manifested through voter bribery, manifested through tokenism and clientelism. These are things that sustain him in power. There is no way he's going to cut his support system. But the citizens can only push him to cut the support system. And the people of Uganda need to come to the realization that for them to be able to reform parliament, to have a parliament that serves people, to have a judiciary that serves people, then they must tackle the person that is presiding over the state capture that has made these institutions to serve an individual instead of serving the citizens of Uganda.
Okay.
Otherwise, we remain in circles of talking about judiciary, talking about parliament, but when we know the real elephant in the house.
Well, according to Benjamin Katana, the real elephant in the house is the head of state. That is exactly what he's saying. Let's go for a break. When we return, this conversation does continue. Judicial response to the protests, the weight of anti-corruption protests on the judiciary, and also we're trying to ensure that we break the silence that has been on, especially the last 6 months, by civic space actors. I don't want to be specific on which NGOs should be out now, but we are concerned as a country that maybe they are sleeping on the job. We do have one of the actors here with us. She'll be telling us exactly.
They are accused of being the funders, and they are saying they are sleeping on the job.
Francis Bobu, I have with me Benjamin Katana, and well, no doubt, one of the civic space actors, Sarah Birete. But before I come to Sarah Birete, so she can defend, or, well, not defend others, let me ask the question, and this one should be going to Captain Francis Babu. Benjamin Katana spoke about the need, not the need, but an inability of a system to reform. What I pick from that submission is that Uganda and the state actors or the leaders have reached a point of no return in terms of ability to reform. They do not first and foremost appreciate that there is even need to have a conversation about reform. The conduct of leadership, the conduct of public officers. Just over the weekend, we had, and I was speaking about it earlier in the show, the tone and the language that is employed by leaders. If you stand up in the heat of controversy and tell us, you want me to retire and go where? That leader demonstrates that they don't have the ability to listen. They don't even appreciate the need to change. I'm not saying people should go somewhere after they retire. Everyone has the freedom to go wherever they want after they've retired, either to the gardens or any other private. The private sector has a lot of opportunities therein. President Museveni himself has attempted to show us that reforming is possible and fighting corruption can be achieved. But just when he has the enormous opportunity to get through this message, he chose to get the revolver and shot himself in the foot by clamping down. Do you see the president as a man who is honestly bent on turning this arc of corruption?
You know, you use the word point of no return. In flying, when you're taking off an aeroplane and you lose an engine before the point of no return, you can stop the aircraft on the runway.
Okay.
But if you lose the engine after passing the point of return, you have to go, whether you like it or not, in one engine. So what is happening, the question is, these guys, have they reached a point of no return? They can continue. It's a very dangerous situation. But let me go to the other point. And I think, let me give you a picture. I'm not trying to support it. I'm going to go back to from the time we got independence. Our constitution has been, our constitutions have been played with since 1962.
True.
Does that justify playing with it again?
Let me explain a point here. And when it reached a point when people were coming and saying something is going wrong, they suspended the constitution. The 1962 constitution was suspended because some people did not agree. In fact, around 1964, 65, 66, people were complaining, the way people are complaining now, for different reasons. And you know what happened in 1966? The whole constitution was suspended. Some guy went and wrote a constitution at home and brought it and put it in the pigeonhole. In 1967, another one. They suspended the other one because they did not agree. Again, it's the state. Okay? In 1970, 71, some guy came and said, we don't like a constitution, let's go without a constitution. So we've been having a problem with the constitution. So I'm trying to explain to my brothers and sisters that the constitution, yes, is very, very important. Unfortunately, some people have completely disrespected these constitutions. Now we go to your question. The president says he's fighting corruption. A group of people says, we want to support you to fight corruption. They did not even say they were against him. They actually said, we want you to
we are lending you.
No, we are supporting you.
We're giving you this.
Yeah. And the place we would like you to start is parliament.
Since you've already told us, you know parliament is colluding.
The question is, what brought about the state to stop it? Look at next door. The group started more or less in the same way. And from that day, the next day it became bigger. The following day it became bigger. They even went to parliament, and they went to the chief justice. So with that in mind, go to their mind now. Should they allow this to continue? Or should they stop it? Or should they foil it so that it stops? My argument is very simple. And when I said, have we developed enough to appreciate the constitution we did? Have we? The answer is no. We have failed. And we need now to review, and therefore His Excellency, that's why I'm saying His Excellency the President and his team, time has come you have foiled this one now. If you don't change very quickly, and Katana said maybe they will not, you don't have the ability to change anymore.
I don't know the Uganda version of the Nyankore proverb that the patient cannot heal, they should pour the medicine.
So my argument is that actually I think, and I'm saying it openly, I think the people in the state, the people who are our leaders in this country, must change now, not tomorrow.
Not tomorrow.
And they must think very carefully. Okay, we have terrorism, we have problems in the country. How can they accommodate, like this young group, for example? And I stand here and say, please get them out of jail, and if possible, even talk to them. Are you with me? I'm on that level. Okay, what has happened has happened. You don't want demonstration. What do you want? How do we support you to fight corruption? Let me ask them a question. How does government want us to support them to fight corruption?
Great question. Benjamin Katana, as we enter the final bend of the program, there are questions also. Must the judiciary change now? Is that even possible? Or it is so much under the stronghold of the regime that they can't even shift a finger?
The judiciary, like any other state institution in Uganda, is under captivity because most of them are operating under a lot of fear. Some of them, not all of them, some of them feel that they are an extension of the ruling party, just like it is with the enforcement agencies. There are people who are supposed to be servants of the state, but they feel they are servants of an individual
NRM.
And the NRM by extension. So it is very hard, very, very hard for the judiciary as an institution to undergo some form of reforms that will make them independent arbiters without fear or favor in execution of their mandate in matters that Museveni considered to be part of political contestation. Because these protests, much as they are targeting corruption, for him, anything that empowers the citizens, he looks at it as a threat. Because his relationship with the citizens has over time changed. He does not look at them as, first of all, the people from whom he derives legitimacy to govern this country. He looks at them as subservients that are struggling to now liberate themselves from him and his estranglement. So for as long as there is that fear on the citizens, the state institutions and the actors involved are living under fear of being brutalized, of losing jobs from the regime. The regime is under fear of being held accountable and possibly removed from power by the citizens. So there is that polarization which creates the environment, a very toxic environment for people that are serving in institutions of the state.
A real state of fear, no doubt about it.
Yeah, but we better come out with this fear thing. I think it's extremely important. Who is creating the fear?
How are you planning to come out of that fear?
Well, I've seen people calling for dialogue on corruption. I think dialogue on corruption is not necessary.
It's illegitimate even.
Yes, there's nothing to dialogue about when it comes to corruption. But the people calling for dialogue now need to call for dialogue for a calendar of President Museveni's exit. President Museveni is larger than the Constitution, is larger than institutions of Uganda. He's the biggest institution as an individual. He's a superior institution. The people that we say are scared of exercising their mandate, everybody either has heard what the president is saying or wants to second guess what the president is thinking based on the body language, and they don't want to annoy him. We have even had judges of annoying the president. So you have this situation that state capture is at maximum. No institution can function. Even when people are targeting parliament, judiciary, electoral commission, they cannot function. It's the president, number 2 is the army, the constitution is now number 3. So people who want dialogue should have dialogue on peaceful handover of power. Let's have a calendar for President Museveni's exit. Let's have a transition. Let's have institutions regaining their authority as envisaged in the Constitution.
Sada Bidete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance, many thanks for that submission. Many thanks to you too, Benjamin Katana. I hope your submissions are not taken to mean the sentiments of the judiciary. You're simply an observer as a legal
I'm
mind.
speaking as a citizen. I don't speak for the judiciary.
Somebody might say, oh, you tried to paint us the wrong way. Thank you too, Captain Francis Topo.
I'm praying for those
for helping us, most importantly, understand how the state thinks.
I pray for those who are afraid, who are in fear.
Who are in fear.
So they can get out of it.
And for the freedom for the arrested protesters.
Actually, fear is a very bad thing.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. And on part of the morning at NTV, I would like to amplify the voice that the youth who are incarcerated right now must be released. The charges that were slapped against them are frivolous, and of course, the very it simply makes things worse. Dialogue must be held, and they should be talked to. But I also speak for those who went there before them. There's a whole lot of youth in prisons. Many are there for selling eggs on the street, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others are there for being idle somewhere else, not necessarily on the day of the protests, and they need to be out so that they can be productive. They should be able to benefit from the interventions that are being rolled out across the country. The conversation must start on so much. We cannot actually finish everything here on Morning at NTV. It's been a pleasure having your company. I'll be catching you tomorrow. So on behalf of the entire team behind the scenes that ensures this is a very exhaustive 2.5 hours, many thanks. Have yourselves a lovely day.